Hello, welcome to another episode of Varsity360. My name is Will Denner. I'm a sports reporter at the Columbian, joined today by Meg Wochnick in a rare all-reporter Varsity360 episode. First off, we'd like to give a quick shout out to First Pacific Financial for continuing to let us use their podcast studio here in downtown Vancouver, and by extension, supporting high school athletics. Today, Meg, is a very special episode for us. We're going to be revealing the all-region football team from the fall 2024 season. We've done this, I think, since the mid-2000s at the Columbian for all sports and publishing a story on the player of the year as well as a team across all sports. Last year, we kind of decided to do something a little different by adding this kind of podcast element to the football team, kind of giving us an opportunity to go a little bit deeper, kind of, a little bit kind of into what makes these players special. So today we're going to do that. We're going to reveal the whole team as well as the player of the year. But first, I think it's important to kind of explain the process of how we come to land on these teams, kind of the decision-making that we do as a staff, the criteria we look for throughout the year, and then kind of the input we get from coaches as well. Do you just kind of want to explain kind of what goes into this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So all region teams, we do them for all sports, individual sports as well as team sports. But what makes football and the other team sports a little bit different is there's that added element that we have, and that is the coaches vote. So we send out a ballot to all head football coaches across Southwest Washington, and on that ballot are all the names of the kids on either the first team all-league or an MVP of that league across all four of our leagues, 4A down to 1A, and they're separated by position groups. So everybody from 4A, 3A to a 1A, if you're a first team all-league player at your position, you're basically bunched together in your position group. And so while the coaches are doing that ballot, we as a staff also do our own individual ballots. And so it's based off of observations throughout the season. We're at games usually once, sometimes twice per week, depending on the schedule for that week. And so once the coaches do their ballots, once we do our individual ballots, we will come together as a staff and kind of figure out how best to fit the holes of the 28-player team that we have for all regions. So every year it's always difficult. It's kind of a multi-layered process. Like I said, we're factoring in multiple leagues, multiple players with 2, sometimes 3 positions on an all-league team. And so it's all about trying to find the best fit for so many of these players. So, but the end goal every year is always the same. It's about honoring and acknowledging who we feel are the best players in Southwest Washington. So that's kind of a rundown of how things are going. So let's get right into the team. The folks didn't come to push play to listen to us talk about right. how it comes together. So I'm excited to kind of unveil this team as well as I know the viewers out there watching.
Yep, no more time wasted. We will get right into it. We will start with the defense and the defensive backfield. 4 players in this secondary group. We have Jared Forner of Camas, Josiah Alanis of Evergreen, Elijah Franco of Washougal, and Joe Calarami of Seton Catholic. And when I look at these 4, Meg, it's a really star-studded group. What are kind of some things that stand out for you in this group?
It is. Well, first and foremost, all 4 of these guys are safeties, and I think what stands out for me about all 4 of them is just so smart football players, such as coaches say, really high football IQs. And I'll start with Joe Calarami of Seton Catholic. This is a kid who could have been an all-region pick at multiple positions on this team. It's all about kind of finding that right fit. For me, he really stood out in that safety spot, really kind of that back half of the season. Of his 5 interceptions, 4 came over a back-to-back stretch in that league title win over La Center, as well as their Week 10 win over Chelan. So this kid's actually going to go to Army and be a slot receiver, but for this all-region team, he gets the nod at safety.
Yeah, that's a good note on Joe Calarami too. Definitely would have been qualified as a receiver as well, and he was named Trico League MVP, but also a very deserving candidate at defensive back. I'll take Elijah Franco next of Washougal. Man, I saw him first game of the season against Mountain View. He had 3 interceptions, and it felt like he just did not stop from there. Really impactful season. He was named the 2A GSHL defensive MVP, had 8 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 3 defensive offensive touchdowns and a team high 109 tackles. Now, obviously, he didn't come out of nowhere. Like he was a great player for them last year as well. I think he was their leading tackler as well, actually. But kind of, with some of those star, seniors on that team, maybe a little bit under the radar. But this was really his year to shine. And then in the second half of the season, really made a huge impact on offense as well. Kind of giving the Panthers a new wrinkle with him as a quarterback in the I formation. Just a really impactful season for them, and one of the reasons the Panthers were able to keep their postseason appearance streak intact.
I'll move on to Josiah Alanis of Evergreen. This kid, first and foremost, just his size-wise, he's 6'1". He could be that outside backer if need be, but he was primarily that strong safety spot. In his position, he will play also at the next level. He's a Boise State commit, but watching Evergreen, and unfortunately, I only saw Evergreen once this year, but what stood out about Josiah is just that overall athleticism that you see on the football field. The last time I saw him in action was when he won the state title in the triple jump in 3A back in May, and you just forget just how great of an overall athlete he is. He's always around the ball, always making plays on a very veteran-savvy Evergreen defense on a team that won its first league title in 17 years.
And then lastly, with Jared Forner, a crucial piece of the Papermakers secondary. He had 71 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 5 interceptions, which I believe was second on the team. You told me, which was interesting, I didn't realize he was kind of in kind of a part-time role last year, but really took another step this season, was an important part of kind of a retooled Papermakers secondary. It seemed like he really made some impactful plays during their playoff run that come to mind. But yeah, really, one of several really good players on that Camas defense.
Not just the secondary too, but he's also special team wise, their top returner, and also their holder on kicks. So he did a little bit of everything this year.
Yep, well said.
Moving on to the linebackers, same deal, 4 positions here. A standout crew here for the linebackers. We'll start with Nico Spear of Camas, Wyatt Aisland of LaCenter, Bo Harlan of Camas, and Caden Hamlin of Skyview. These are fast, these are physical, and absolutely just game changers when you talk about that second level of the defense.
Yeah, I'm not even sure where to start here. That really another strong group of linebackers. I feel like this linebacking group is always a really strong one when we're choosing this team each year. I'll start with Wyatt Aisland of LaCenter. That middle linebacker spot has kind of been his constant in his high school football career, while he's moved to so many different positions on offense, from quarterback to H-back to center, back to quarterback this year. But he was once again a defensive MVP in the Trico League. Just a really good tackler, playmaker. I mean, he can make interceptions. I think in that season opener against Monty, he had a fumble return for a touchdown. Really kind of a key heartbeat for that defense at LaCenter that had a really strong season.
We'll go to Nico Spear next, and again, this is another kid who easily could be an all-region tight end. Unfortunately, you can only be on one spot on the all-region team, but this is a kid who was a unanimous pick by the coaches to be both a linebacker and a tight end. It just shows the quality that Nico is as an all-around athlete. But just you talk about what he brings as that interior lineman, a middle linebacker, now a 2-time 4A GSHL defensive MVP. He's headed to Idaho to also play linebacker, and man, he just does so much to control that interior. 161 tackles in 14 games. That is just ungodly numbers for a kid that just has a motor that just never stops.
And let's not forget about his teammate, Bo Harlan, also of Camas. To me, there's a lot you can say about his play on the field, and we'll get to that. I think his leadership qualities really stood out, not just this year, but really kind of one of the key leaders among a really good group of senior leaders. He was the guy always breaking them down in like the post-game huddle. Felt like he was really kind of well-spoken and always kind of had the pulse of that team. But on the field, really, I would say a big playmaker who seemed to always kind of have a knack for making them in clutch moments. I think of, their win against Skyview when he scores the go-ahead, I think it was a go-ahead touchdown, or maybe kind of to ice the game, and then gets a game-winning interception. In that Sumner game, that goal line stand late in the third quarter, we kind of thought that might be the turning point. He makes 2 tackles for loss that kind of leads them to that goal line stand. Just a lot of big time plays to be made for Bo Harlan.
And finally, Caden Hamlin, man, this kid has been really a staple of that second level of Skyview's defense, really since his sophomore year. And Caden this year, first time over 100 tackles for the season, finished with 107 for Skyview, leading the Storm to back-to-back state quarterfinal appearances. And really just what impressed me about Caden is just wherever the ball is, just there is Caden Hamlin, just every single time. It's just so impressive the way he moves. He's 6'2", and man, really kind of taking that next level step 2 of that leadership role on a linebacking crew that really was very sophomore heavy,
right? And
really relying on Caden as that senior and now a 3-year starter for Skyview.
Yeah, and we'll move on to the defensive line. Another 4 we have, starting with Luke Webb of Camas, Raya Tua of Skyview, Makai Miller of Evergreen, and Grayson Bagley of Kingsway Christian. When we were talking in our meeting yesterday, you seemed to kind of sense a similarity kind of with these 4 guys. What kind of is the biggest thing that you see from all these 4?
Oh boy, a lot of things. Fast, ferocious. I'm going to start with Luke Webb. You know, I know I touched on him way back in September, who was a kid who hadn't taken a snap yet for Camas. He had transferred from Southern California during wrestling season last winter. And I thought, I went out on a bold prediction and thought, boy, this kid might have 20 sacks just the way he plays. He finished with 8. But did have 35 quarterback hurries, which a number of teams kind of do keep those stats. And it just shows that as fast as he moves off the line, quarterbacks are basically running for their lives. And, you know, there was a couple times this year, more than a couple, that he goes unblocked. And when Luke Webb goes unblocked, you have about a half a second if you're a quarterback to either make a play or get the heck out of Dodge, because he is coming for you and in a hurry.
For Raya Tua of Skyview, I thought he made, an immediate impact from his first game back against Puyallup. I think that was in week 3. He was playing with the club. He had an injured wrist, but immediately comes in and gets a sack, a tackle for loss, and really just kind of a game wrecker that changes their whole line. He was an all-region selection for us last year as well. He racked up, I think it was a defensive line best, 59 tackles, including 15 tackles for loss.
And I'll go with Grayson Bagley next of Kingsway Christian, the only small school kid on this defensive line, but just the way he plays, he is not a small school kid whatsoever. So he is the co-defensive MVP of the Trico League. 1/3 of his tackles this year were tackles for loss. He finished with 52, had 18 TFLs, and just an absolute disruptor on that edge. Also a two-way guy.
Yeah, and that's impressive for considering how loaded that Trico League was for him to crack into that co-defensive MVP. And then Makai Miller of Evergreen, man, when I think about that defense, I mean, that Evergreen defense was much improved this year. I think they allowed an average of 12 points per game, and it really kind of felt like Makai Miller was somewhat the heartbeat of that, kind of the heart and soul. Kind of a guy that plays with a motor that never really quits. And I don't think we have the numbers in front of us, but I do know that he averaged double-digit tackles, might have been a team high, and yeah, just a really, really key part of that Evergreen defense. A guy that, and they were fortunate where they didn't have to play everybody two ways this year, but Makai Miller, when he was on the field on defense, you were getting 100% energy and effort.
You said 100% energy and effort 100% of the time. So I think the play that sticks out for me in their loss against Stanwood, and Stanwood was in the red zone, and their quarterback is basically running for his life, pretty much ran the equivalent of 20 yards, chased down by Makai Miller, who goes all Superman on the play, tackles him for a 1-yard loss. 2 plays later, it's a forced fumble recovered by Makai Miller. Like, this kid just doesn't stop. And if he would play defense, he would also give that 100% effort every single time.
And also a rugby player, which is interesting as a football player as well.
A standout rugby guy, absolutely.
Yep.
We will move on to the offense, starting with our all-purpose nominees. So we have 3 of those, and we'll start with kind of a different wrinkle this year. So we have 2 all-purpose players, and we'll get into our kicker and punter. So first off, we've got Elijah Anderson of Woodland, and then Isaac Cromie of Le Center. Both of these guys very deserving of that AP honor.
Yeah, I'll start with Isaac Cromie. It was interesting that we had 2 this year. We don't always do that, but we kind of reserve the right to have that second all-purpose spot if we kind of feel like we can't fit a particular player into another already loaded position group. Obviously, like we said, the linebackers really loaded, as well as running back, both positions that Isaac Cromie plays. I think he ended the regular season actually as the second leading rusher in the area, which is pretty remarkable when you consider the running back talent that we have in Southwest Washington. Really kind of the workhorse back for them, but also a really key part of that defense and their linebacking core. A memory that stands out for me, the only game that I saw the center this year was a Week 10 game against Elma. Cromie had 5 touchdowns, 3 rushing, 1 receiving, and 1 defensive touchdown as well. I think he scored 3 of them in a row in the second quarter. Just kind of a wrecker on both sides of the ball, and really a deserving honor for a senior who's been a big part of La Center for several years now.
And Elijah Anderson, who was our All-Region Player of the Year last year, this kid just continues to do everything for now the 2-time league champion Woodland Beavers. So I think what separated Elijah this year is really taking on that quarterback role. Wasn't projected to be the starter coming into the season, but by week 2 there had been some personnel changes, but not just taking the ball in the Wildcat formation and running. He really showed his arm strength and was really a great pocket passer as well. So as the season went along, you saw really what was an 0-2 Woodland team to start rise up and have a tremendous winning streak all the way to winning a league championship. So he could do it on free safety. He was also their punter, averaged better than 42 yards per punt, and he's headed to Idaho State as well.
Yeah, just a player who's pretty selfless, I think, willing to play any role, and they needed him at quarterback this year, and he was able to fulfill that and still have a productive season on the back-to-back 2A GSHL champion Woodland Beavers.
And rounding out the all-purpose is our kicker and punter, Cannon Moore of Union. This kid, whether it was touchbacks, whether it was punts, field goals, this kid was basically automatic every week.
Yeah, and also a key part of Union's soccer team, a guy that's been a good football player for them for multiple years as well. And we will move on to offensive line with that. We have 5, obviously. Another kind of tricky one, I think, for us every year to kind of whittle down. But our 5 are Jackson Good of Camas, Noah Thomas of Skyview, Juan Pacias Stanton of Mountain View, Austin St. Amour of Seton Catholic, and Jason Sloan of Kelso.
That's a heck of a fivesome right there. That's a fantastic group. I'll start with the now 4-time starter at center, Juan Pacias Stanton of Mountain View. You just don't see a 4-year starter on the offensive line at the large school level, much less a starter at the center position. This kid, you see his growth from his freshman to his senior year, and he has just been clutch and automatic, and really paved the way this year for new coach Sean McDonald, and kind of transitioning more to that running game with Jaden Brown being that primary ball carrier.
Yeah, with Austin St. Amour, I mean, I think this is an award that kind of reflects the overall team-wide performance and improvement of the offensive line. They were a pretty young group last year, primarily all sophomore and juniors as far as I know, but kind of came back this year, kind of learned a lot from their semifinal loss last year against Royal, and St. Amour was a key part of that. Just a physical specimen too, standing 6'8", 345 pounds.
Yeah, he's a kid who actually started at guard in the season, and as the season progressed, he was taking snaps at center. So I mean, find another kid at center, 6'8", 340. Snapping the ball every play. You just don't see it in high school, much less college.
Right.
I'll talk about Jackson Good of Camas next. They're starting left guard, and you mentioned about just the progress of Seton's line, and that was really the case with Camas as well. You saw it as the postseason went along as well, with the shining light of that run game, and it starts with those big boys up front. So Jackson Good was nearly a unanimous choice for this team. In fact, was the top vote getter of all the offensive linemen. So this kid really had an outstanding season, did great with pass protection against what turned out to be the state's leading passer. Yeah,
one of the leaders on that retooled offensive line. And then Jason Sloan of Kelso. I mean, it feels like we talk about it every year. The Highlanders are just an offensive line factory up there when you think of guys like Brady Phillips and Peyton Stewart in recent years. And Jason Sloan was kind of tasked with being the leader of that line this year for a retooled team a little bit. And, that tradition continued. I mean, they paved the way for one of the best rushers in the area in Aiden Montagna and a productive offense as a whole. And Jason Sloan was a big part of that.
We'll round out the offensive line with Noah Thomas of Skyview. This kid has been that staple at left tackle. He's committed to Oregon State. And whether it was blocking for Doogie Poindexter at quarterback or opening up those blocks and the holes for the run game with Levi Webb or Rex Allinger, this kid did just about everything and did it the right way as well.
Yeah, and one of those guys who's a two-way player as well. I felt like he made some really key plays on the D-line as well in their state playoff win against Bothell. So another kind of high-motor player who can play both sides of the ball.
All right, moving on. Wide receivers are next. There's 4 in this group, starting out with Chase McGee of Camas, Terrence Sarion of Evergreen, Gavin Packer of Skyview, and rounding it out with Riker Rualis of Seton Catholic. Boy, all 4 of these guys, they're sure hands receivers. They know how to get open, and regardless of their route, these guys can make plays.
Yeah, I think this group was pretty well established for most of the year. We were kind of debating on whether to go 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, or 4 wide receivers. Obviously, Nico Spear was a very deserving tight end, but putting him at linebacker also was very deserving. So when we start with this group of wide receivers, I'll go with Gavin Packer of Skyview. What else is new? It was another productive season for the Boise State signee. He's been a 4-year varsity player. I think one of the most versatile weapons in our area. He had nearly 1,500 all-purpose yards this year with 13 receiving touchdowns, 3 rushing, and then also filled in at QB for a stretch when Doogie Poindexter went down this season. And I think really kind of the spark plug of that team, again, talking about that state playoff game against Bothell, they faced a 10-point deficit in the fourth quarter. I remember asking Coach Steve Kaiser after the game, what was the difference that got you guys started? And he said, it's Gavin Packer. He's our spark plug. A car can't run without spark plugs, and Gavin Packer's our guy. Absolutely.
He's been that way really since that back half of his freshman year. I still remember that 103-yard return for a touchdown he had, and that was really his coming out moment as far as who he is as a high school football player for the next 4 years. I'll talk about Chase McGee. Man, this kid, hey, by the way, pole vaulters, make great wide receivers.
I knew you were going to say that.
Exactly. So this kid just absolutely had a monster season. 1,400 plus receiving yards, 24 touchdowns. It didn't matter what the route was. Chase McGee found a way to get open, and for me, what separated him, it was his yards after the catch. You really saw that second-level speed with him. Just a monster season. He's had a number of offers for his track and field abilities, and those offers for football are coming in as well. Just a monster season for Chase McGee.
Yeah, I talked about Gavin Packer being a spark. It seemed like Chase McGee, especially in those 2 final state playoff games, both the semifinals against Gonzaga Prep and the state championship game against Sumner, that he was kind of the guy who kickstarted their offense when they were a little slow, especially in that second half against Gonzaga Prep. And then he also scores 2 touchdowns against Sumner. And like you said, lots of yards after the catch on screen plays and kind of, having the great vision, after the catch and kind of following the lead of his blockers. Moving on from there, I'll go with Terrence Sarion of Evergreen, a junior this year. And, he kind of carved out a feature role with the Plainsman offense. I felt like he developed some good chemistry with freshman quarterback Jaden Baum to kind of become the top target there. Felt like the year before they were kind of trying to figure out, he was a little bit of kind of a hybrid receiver running back, but it seemed like they really kind of honed in on how to use him this year. He finished with over 1,000 receiving yards and had 10 touchdowns. And nearing the end of the season, he committed to Washington. So that'll be exciting to watch in the future as well.
Rounding it out with Riker Rualis of Seton Catholic. So this kid is actually the biggest of the foursome of our receivers. 6'3", just such a vertical threat for Colton Gesser, and 18 touchdowns, just a hair under 1,000 receiving yards. Just a tremendous season. In that state championship game, I think what my best memory of him was just that tremendous 84-yard kickoff return for a touchdown, just waiting for the holes, being patient, and just tiptoeing down that left sideline for a touchdown to keep Seton Catholic within a touchdown of Royal at that point in the first half. But this kid just looks every bit of the part of a wideout is you want it to be. So he's big, he's physical, he's fast, and does everything right at that receiver spot.
Yeah, I mean, he was really a bright spot in that state championship, and I feel like kind of solidified it a little bit with his performance that day. And yeah, Colton Gesser's top target in a very high-powered offense already. From there, we will go to running backs. We have two. We will start with Aiden Montagna of Kelso and also Jacob Williams of Seton Catholic. Two guys that really stood out in, like I said, a really deep group of running backs in Southwest Washington.
I'll start with Aiden Montagna. So this is a kid who's actually from Northern California originally, not really a Southwest Washington kid, and just showed up junior year miraculously. Steve Amrine didn't really know what to make of this kid until week 1, where he just went absolutely nuts a year ago. So you fast forward to now, 1,700 yards rushing, one of the best performances ever for a running back at Kelso, and averaged 196 on the ground. He had multiple 300-yard games, one game against Prairie, and he needed this. His team needed this. All 7 rushing touchdowns. So just quite a performance for this kid. Only about 5'9", 5'10", but he's definitely a bulldozer when it comes to that line of scrimmage and finding space out in the open field.
Right. With Jacob Williams, he was an all-region selection for us last year as well. I feel like as the Cougars kind of got their passing game going, they still had the backbone always of Jacob Williams this year, and he paid it off in a big way with 1,889 yards, 22 touchdowns on 188 carries. That's about 10 yards per carry. And he was a 100-yard rusher in 12 of 13 games this year. And, might sound like a broken record a little bit here, but I felt like once again in the state playoffs, he really kind of saved his best for last. I think of that Life Christian game when they faced 2 fourth-quarter deficits. He scores a pair of rushing touchdowns, and the latter one that ultimately stands to get them into the state semifinals. And that next week they played Montesano. He had 3 touchdowns in that game and made it, in my mind, probably the play of the game, which was a pick 6 from his linebacker spot when it looked like Monty was kind of starting to make a run in the third quarter. He gets a pick 6 and puts them up 2 scores. Just a really outstanding year for Jacob Williams on both sides of the ball, and a really impressive performance for the Cougars.
Outstanding year and career. So he leaves with multiple, not only single season, but career records as well, including over 4,000 rushing yards in his career. You just don't see that in high school football these days, given the way that football is more of now a quarterback, receiver, pass-heavy attack. Moving on to the coveted quarterback spot, and it's Colton Gesser of Seton Catholic. So we talked about just what he was with Riker Morales as his top target, but Gesser had a heck of a year in his junior campaign, 43 touchdown passes, co-offensive MVP along with Jacob Williams out of the Trico League, leading Seton to a place it's never been, and that was the 1A state championship game.
Right, and also completed 63% of his passes. The stats were, I think, kind of made this somewhat of an easy choice for us at quarterback. And beyond the numbers, though, it was interesting to talk to him actually for a story of the week of the state championship game, and just kind of get a little bit of a peek into kind of how he prepares for opponents, kind of the mental side and the chess match that he really relishes about playing football, and kind of film study and kind of trying to deceive defenses, and just kind of that part of it really kind of taking a big step for him this year. So interesting to hear about that side as well.
All right, now it's moving on to the most coveted position of all on this all-region team. It is our all-region football player of the year. And that honor goes to Camas quarterback Jake Davidson. What more can you say about this kid and his senior season? So we've talked at length about just what he's done week after week. 3,700 passing yards, 53 touchdowns, 58 total touchdowns for his senior season. Gatorade State Player of the Year, Max Prep State Player of the Year, and now the All-Region Player of the Year. So just one of the all-time greats to come out of Camas, and there's been a lot of good quarterbacks to come out of that program.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody was really curious to see what it would look like this year in year 2 as a starter, and kind of what Adam Matheson in his first year as coach would do for him. And the results were outstanding, I think, from an individual standpoint, about as good as you could have imagined. Also became a really big rushing threat, which was a key part of their offense, especially when the run game wasn't working. But yeah, he leaves Camas with a massive massive legacy and really just an outstanding season for the coach and the team. And like you profiled earlier, just a really great coach quarterback duo.
Yeah, the week of the state championship game, I had a chance to kind of go peek behind the curtain a bit, and I sat in on a one-on-one film session during lunch between Jake Davidson and Coach Adam Matheson, and just Jake really kind of showcased and highlighted that growth in his game, and he's credited a lot of his success this year to Coach Matheson, a guy who knows how to get the best out of quarterbacks, regardless of their size, their strengths, and their abilities. So we really saw Jake Davidson kind of take his game to a new level that we really didn't see a year ago. For as great of a season as he had as a first-time starter as a junior, he just really elevated his game as a senior. So just congratulations to Jake on a fantastic year, and congratulations to all 28 of these honorees. So these are not easy decisions by any means.
No.
And so it's a tough process to comb through. But again, like I said at the top of the show, we want to showcase and highlight the best players in Southwest Washington. And this is a fantastic team. So congratulations to all of these honorees that we mentioned.
Yeah, echo that as well. And be sure, obviously, to read your story as well, and the complete all-region team, which will be dropping in Saturday's Columbian paper, as well as online at 360 Preps. Anything else you want to plug, either on this all-region team or anything else?
I think that should do it. So that'll do it for us for the show. Just like school break, we're also going to take a bit of a break for the holidays for this show, but we will be back in early January because it's winter and we've got a lot of basketball, a lot of bowling, a lot of swimming, a lot of wrestling to talk about. So thank you so much for watching. For all of us here at the Columbian Sports Department, have a great rest of the holiday season, and we'll see you on the other side in 2025.